Spoiler warning. If you have not seen the product that this episode is about, you may want to. Events from the product will be talked about. You have been warned.
A lot of people are devastated. I mean, I'm a little bit devastated myself that it does feel like there's...
No. I am your father. And here we go.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat. This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Easily Entertained. I'm your host, Bryson Olson. Here we talk about all things entertainment. I am once again joined by fellow entertainment enjoyer, Cormick Bone.
Heck yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Today we are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which just came out very recently.
Yeah.
But before we do get
news.
into that, be sure to give us a follow so that you can be notified of all the latest episodes.
Yeah. You're going to want to hear our opinions. They're very important.
Yeah. You want to listen to what we have to say.
It's true. It's true. Everybody does.
But yeah, so Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the end of a fantastic trilogy. Trilogy, I would say, is probably the best in the MCU, 100%.
Easily. We were talking about it earlier. It's certainly my favorite Marvel trilogy.
It's so good.
Like, and it almost irks me to say that because I love me some Spider-Man, right? Like, that's a great trilogy. Don't get me wrong. But there's something about the Guardians, the way that they can get at your emotions. It's
speaking of emotions, I think that's really where these movies kind of connect with everybody, is the heart. And I think in this one particular, it's the heart of the franchise. It gives every character their time to shine. It doesn't feel like rushed. I feel like what happens a lot in these big superhero team-ups is that there's too many characters. We don't know who everyone is. We don't get any time to develop everybody. There's a lot of side characters. That doesn't really feel the case in this one. Even the side characters have some development. Like in this one, it's like Kraglin and Cosmo. They have some development still in it, even if they're not massively a big part of the movie.
Yeah, and even like the friends that Rocket is locked up with at the very beginning, like those are, I mean, they're side characters, but you really get a lot of development from very little screen time, which is it's amazing to the talent of everybody involved creating those characters' stories, because they really like I would be curious to see the ratio of how much screen time those other animals, those other experiments had, because those other experiments had, because I feel like I know them really well, because and I don't think they had that much screen time now that I think about it. But I mean, they're a huge part of the story. I mean, all the trailers pointed to this. Rocket was a very big focus point for this film, and even he isn't, like, I mean, he's kind of incapacitated for a long time.
Yeah, and spoiler warning, I will remake that at the beginning of the video because this is a very new movie.
Yeah.
So basically the whole movie kind of takes place with Rocket dying.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tension throughout the film, and you get a lot of flashbacks to Rocket. It kind of goes into his origin, because they reference it in the earlier movies that he was created by someone else. They kind of experimented on a lower life form, a raccoon.
Right.
And they like added all these cybernetic enhancements to him. And so this really
it answers the questions.
It answers the question.
It delved into the details.
It tells us why and who.
Yeah.
And so it shows how Rocket became Rocket, and even like how he got his name.
Yeah. Oh, that moment, so good.
Oh, so good. And then it's followed by such a horrific moment.
It is, man. Oh, this movie will jar you. It's so good.
It definitely tugs at your heartstrings. It gives you a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's kind of a thing that James Gunn tends to do, I've found with the Guardians movies, is that they will give some serious times and then immediately follow it up with a joke.
Yeah, hit
so
you with a joke.
Can't even you can't even process what just happened. You're like, ha, I'm so sad.
You're like, I thought I was supposed to be crying, but I'm chuckling. What's happening?
Exactly. It throws you for a loop, which
true.
I think is a very good way to do it because it keeps you engaged. You're very compelled to continue watching because things are just happening.
Yeah.
And it can be funny. It can be sad. You can be really angry at something. I think that's a really good way to do it because it keeps your audience's attention.
Yeah, and it reflects, to me, it reflects my human experience, so I figure a lot of human experience, that's what it is reflecting, where you're going to, in pretty much, I would say, in every situation, there's going to be some this and that. There's going to be some good and bad. And there's going to be some crying and some laughing, and it really is kind of, I would say, unique, especially by way of the Marvel films to the Guardians. Like you're saying, we had watched the first and second after the third just to catch up, and it did happen more. I didn't really notice it the first time I watched the first and second, because in the third I feel like it happens a lot more, where it's like, oh, my heart. Chuckle time.
I think it's because the story in the third is more serious.
Much deeper.
Like a lot of the other ones, they had some serious elements to them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the main story. In this one, a main character who we're very familiar with at this point and is like a fan favorite is dying. You half expect this character to pass away, and you are praying that all the Guardians can make him survive to get him the help that he needs. And so it pulls on that emotion, and I think that's a brilliant way to do it. And then kind of off the topic of Rocket as well, you have some of the fallout from Endgame, because Gamora is back, even though she died in Infinity War and then came back in Endgame because of the time jumps and everything. But because she's from 2014, she doesn't have the love for Quill.
Not at all.
She could murder him easily. She wouldn't even think twice about it. Yeah. And so you kind of have to go in with that as well, where Nebula feels like her sister isn't really there. Right. Like, even though she is aware of who this person was at the time, it's not who she then grew to love. Yeah. And then you have Peter, who loved Gamora. A lot. And now it's not the same person. It's a completely different person. Yeah. And then you have Gamora herself, who feels out of place. She feels like she doesn't belong in this world either.
Yeah, that was a super interesting dynamic that I didn't consider actually coming into this one, because I kind of forgot that Gamora had come back. I thought she was dead. So when I saw her in the preview, I was like, oh. So I was a little underprepared, I guess, going into the film, which is going to be a common thing for Marvel anymore with how much they've got. But I was really I pleasantly surprised isn't exactly accurate, but I really loved that dynamic, actually, because when you have that, I like what he did. When you have that, like, character reset with Gamora, you could have like we talked about earlier, you could have that repeat of her characterization and her character growing. And you do a little bit, because, I mean, she is still the same person. Well, I mean, a duplicate, I guess, of the same individual. But they don't, I loved this, that they didn't have her repeat her path. I really, really did enjoy that, because I've seen some things recently where they were like, again, spoilery warning, toward the end, Peter is like, he's out in space and he's dying. We're like, oh, nuts. Like, we thought it was Rocket, now it's Peter. Like, what's happening? And then Adam saves him. Yeah. Oh my gosh. What race is he a part of? Oh, dang.
I know what it is. It'll come to me. The Sovereign.
Sovereign.
That's what he
That's
is.
it. The Sovereign.
I was like, what is it?
No, you got it. So Adam, who's a part of the Sovereign, he's like a project that they did that's teased at the end of Guardians 2. He saves Peter, which I think is a really great...
it's his redemption arc.
Yeah, it's a really great direction to take with the story, because we get at the end again where Rocket is starting to become the leader now. Peter goes home and that kind of thing. And so instead of, like, a lot of people were like, have Gamora save him like he saved Gamora. But I think that's not where those characters are going. Because they had a little bit of tease.
And throughout the film, like, although they get closer to each other,
there is some connection, but it's different.
Yeah, she didn't grow love for him the same way. Like, Peter fell in love with her in the first one. She did not in this one. And that's okay. Yeah. They're different characters. And I like that they did it that way, especially because they could give Gamora a better send-off. Because I believe I watched an interview earlier today of James Gunn talking about Gamora, because I think the original plan, they weren't realizing Gamora was going to die before the third movie.
Oh.
And so that wasn't initially the plan. But James Gunn realized that Zoe Saldana, who plays Gamora, didn't want to do the character for a really, really long time.
Right.
Like, she only wanted to play it for so many years. And so they originally were actually going to kill Gamora off in the second movie.
Really? Huh.
And he keeps knocking the camera.
I'm so
it's hilarious.
sorry.
You're good. But so, like, they needed to have a good send-off.
Yeah.
And so I think kind of with what they were given, because I don't think it was the original plan that Gamora was going to die in Endgame and then come back. They worked with what they had, and I think it made it better.
I agree.
Because now they have a send-off that makes sense. She's a different person. She has to go off and do her own path now, because hers and Peter's were kind of tied before. And now that she's back, they have to go their own separate ways.
They got to go their own way.
I got to go my own way.
That's a Fleetwood Mac song, which they are... Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely one that they pull at your heartstrings. I think the emotion is what really makes it. And I think that on its own is kind of what has made Guardians such a good trilogy.
Yeah.
Especially considering Guardians of the Galaxy were not a big name before the MCU. They existed, and any comic book nerds, you can let me know if I'm getting my history wrong.
Give us some correction.
But it was like a mid-series.
Right.
Like, people knew, like, if you were into comics, you knew of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But if you didn't, it wasn't mainstream enough that you knew it. Batman is mainstream. Spider-Man, Superman, those were all before the MCU were mainstream names.
Global names.
Everyone knows who those superheroes are. Not a lot of people knew who Guardians of the Galaxy were.
Right.
And then the MCU comes along and gets like a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
They just knock it out of the park, and now it's the fan favorite.
It's true.
Everyone loves the Guardians of the Galaxy.
They replaced the Tower of Terror.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big thing.
Exactly. And it's like, you can ask people, be like, what do you think is your favorite Marvel movie? Probably about 8 times out of 10, it's going to be one of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's true.
Because it hits for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's fun, it's emotional, it's action-packed. There's so many aspects to it that make it good.
Yeah. The music has always been big.
I was going to say, I was like, the nostalgia of that music, because it has kind of progressed through different decades, like 80s, 90s, and now 2000s at the end of this last one.
The ending for Guardians 3, they changed they visually show us, which is something that one of our video professors has talked to us a lot about when we're learning about some films. He says, show it, don't tell it. And so, I notice it way too much now.
Yeah.
But they show us where it's a shift, like everything's shifting at the end of this film. Rocket's becoming a leader, Peter's going home, and Gamora's going on her own way. And they show us a shift of the decades, which is big symbolism for like this whole massive change.
A progression into a new era.
Yeah, and with the 2000s, and they played Dog Days. I was like, brother, oh, hurt me good.
Yeah.
It hurt me so good.
They were just ready to start pulling.
It was beautiful. It's truly a beautiful ending. It really is.
Agreed. And I think something I saw earlier today is a lot of the Marvel stuff doesn't feel like it comes to an end.
That's true.
Like, they still leave a lot of things open-ended. And still, technically, in this one, they did.
Right.
But there was a huge sense of finality to it. This was a trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we'll see probably the Guardians again.
Right.
But
those characters are coming back.
But this is probably the last time we're seeing them all together as a group.
Yep.
Because we're going to see Rocket, because he's probably going to lead a new Guardians.
A new group, yeah.
We'll probably see bits of Drax and Nebula doing the new city that they want to do with all like
in the Nowhere Dome.
Yep. And you have Peter visiting Earth again.
Yeah, I'm truly curious to see what happens with Peter. He's back home with Grandpa. Like, what's up with that?
Like, I like that they gave an end.
Yeah.
They're like, everyone is done with this portion of their lives, and they're going to go on to do their own things. That's something that doesn't happen a lot in movies. They try...
especially in movies that are as franchised as
exactly.
this is.
I really like that they could end it. Because although I'm like, oh, I want to see all these characters again.
Right.
I love Rocket. I love Groot. I love Star-Lord. I want to see them all. It's okay for it to end.
Yeah. That's like you're saying, this is a fan favorite. A lot of people are devastated. I mean, I'm a little bit devastated myself that it does feel like there's an end to this. But there's something so powerful in knowing when your story's over. There's a lot of show like last week when we talked about or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, when we talk about Hill House and those limited series. He knows when when the end of his story is, and he moves on to another story, which is, I mean, so indicative of, again, the human experience and life. And that's truly like some of the most beautiful things in all of cinema for me, in any movies that have a story and then they end it. And then, like, if that director or if that universe, so to speak, continues with a different story, and then they're both, like, good, like, that's truly beautiful. And it's like, right now we're watching Gravity Falls, and a lot of people are dying to have more content like that. It's a short 2 seasons. And personally, I mean, I love the show, but I think it cannot be any longer than it is. It's got to stay the 2 seasons because it's got the story and it tells it, and it's great.
I think that's something that a lot of artists of any kind, writers, video makers, whatever, it's hard to know where to end.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to come to terms that you're going to end. Like, especially like with James Gunn and all the cast members of Guardians, this was like a passion project, essentially. They've all gotten super close. They're practically a found family, just like the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves.
In reality, these actors. And,
it's everything. And it's hard to accept that everything ends. But it's like a bittersweet moment, because you're like, well, I want more, but they made it satisfying the way it ends.
Yeah.
And I love when they can do that, because like Avengers didn't exactly do that.
Right.
Iron Man didn't exactly do that in his trilogy.
Right. Just
anyways.
in his films. Right.
I think they did that well in Endgame, but like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
But like Spider-Man, Captain America, it's constantly open-ended.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want an end.
Right.
I'm like, although I love all these characters, like Spider-Man, he's my favorite.
Yeah.
He's always going to be my favorite. I would like a story
to close
where it closes, and you'd be like, well, there's not going to be any more, but it was great what we had.
Right. And that's an interesting idea, because like you say, it's hard to find that balance. So having that, endless stream of, oh man, I loved this guy, I love watching this. Having it, you just watch that stuff eventually does get, derivative and repetitive. And anytime you're watching a movie, you're putting yourself in the character's shoes. That's like, I mean, whether you notice it or not, that's what you're doing. That's why we love movies. That's why we love watching it. So if you put yourself in a person's shoes where their story just keeps repeating, or it just doesn't seem like there's any end to it, then you're like, oh man, will what I'm doing right now never end? Like, I mean, right now I'm doing some good stuff. I'm doing some bad stuff. I want some stuff to end. You know? So I think that might be where that's coming from, where you're like, some stuff's just got to end so that I can move on. Yeah. Like, eventually, I'm graduating from college. That's going to happen.
Oh, I hate that because next year's my final year. So I'll be like, I have to do other things. What am I going to do?
You thought graduating from high school meant you grew up? Nah, bro.
Nah, because after college, then you really have to take care of things. And I'm like, ooh. So that'll be interesting. But it is that sense of finality is what I think makes it the best MCU trilogy. Because it's a closed story. Yeah. And I think all the movies stand alone. On their own. Yeah. Like, clearly, like, everything is open-ended with the Marvel Universe. But they all stand really well on their own. You don't have to have seen everything else to understand what is happening. And I think a mark of a good franchise is being able to do that. Yeah. Because a lot of their properties, you better have seen everything at least up until Endgame, or you will be so lost.
Yeah, you won't be able to enjoy. You'll feel left out, which is a big issue. And we kind of talked about that when, that was a different podcast, though, when we talked about the Mario movie where they did a good job of not being exclusive. And yeah, you're so right. Because instead of, it's almost where instead of being open-ended, which that's a given, like you just said, it's a given in Marvel, maybe instead of it being that kind of open-endedness, it should be like the egg drops instead, which is kind of what it started as, where it was like, here's your movie, stay for the end credit scene. That's where they connect.
Yeah, and then as things go on, you can be like, oh, they had this in here. They kind of knew this from the beginning, and now it's all in your face.
Now it's the whole movie.
It's not subtle anymore.
Yeah, it's really not.
And I think that's kind of what I'm a bit interested to see with where the Guardians are going to go.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think is coming up next for the Guardians? Because they have all kind of gone their own ways. Rocket is now the new leader, as we said. Peter's back on Earth. Gamora is with the Ravagers. You have Drax and Nebula starting a new city. You have Mantis going off on her own. She left the group because she wanted to do things for herself. Right. And then you also have James Gunn, who's the leader of everything. He created the Guardians, essentially.
Guy in charge, big man on campus.
This is his last Marvel movie, and he's going off to create the new DC
He's going to be Kevin Feige for DC.
Yeah, quite literally, he's over everything.
Yeah, which will be, I mean, honestly, that's exciting.
Oh, agreed.
The stuff he's done here at Marvel is gorgeous.
Because I think it's hilarious. Because he got fired originally from Guardians 3 because of some past tweets. I don't know exactly what the tweet said.
Whatever.
But then he got rehired. But during that period, he had made the Suicide Squad, and now he's in charge of all DC. They're like, this guy.
He makes good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Just, you can't deny it.
And so...
So that's exciting on its own thing.
Yeah, so everyone's kind of going different ways. So...
What do I think?
Yeah, what do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I think my favorite thing that I'm most excited to watch is Rocket. I mean, especially because after Guardians 3, he's just such a big part of that film. I'm most excited to see how that goes, because now Rocket's story seems really, really fleshed out. And that's going to be an interesting thing because, like you said, you have the Drax and Nebula, they're doing their city thing, and there's a lot of future stuff, but I think there's still some past, some origin stories to answer. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some Gamora origin and some Drax origin, probably in the form of a TV show on Disney Plus, or maybe a special presentation, which those are great. The hour-long stuff, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, I think it's really good about giving us more of a glimpse, but not overdoing it.
Exactly.
Because I think the shows have kind of been overdoing it.
For sure.
Because you're I didn't exactly need all this backstory.
Yeah. Because Guardians 3, like we were saying, it's super big in Rocket's backstory. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some backstory for the others. And you were talking about maybe we could even still, I mean, Rocket's story feels fleshed out, but you pointed out as we were watching the first two films, there's a little hole still. Like, how do Rocket and Groot meet?
Because they are there from the beginning.
Yeah, they're the duo from the beginning of these films, so there could be something there too. So I think there's good stuff to answer in the background. The person I really have zero idea about is Mantis. Well, there's hardly anything to point where and very much on purpose, I would say, because she doesn't really know herself. She's like, I just got to go out and do what I want to do.
We'll see.
I got to find out what I like, which I think is a gorgeous thing too, because like her origin is I'm a slave to ego.
Yeah.
And that's pretty rough. And then it was good to go be with a friend group, but she's never identified herself.
Yeah.
So I really just got zero clues as to what's going to happen there. And I wonder if Drax and Nebula, I wonder if there's going to be, because Drax is like a family man.
Yeah.
I mean, veiled for sure, veiled behind stupidity and his, heart, his culture shock. Yeah, really is what it is.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it. Yeah. So there's some. I wonder if he'll find somebody. I doubt it'll be Nebula because there was a little bit of play where Chris Pratt's character, Star-Lord,
and Peter and Nebula, like there's a little bit of like context drop for that. I'd be interested to see that happen, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some comic evidence of things like that where you could point to. I'm no comic reader. I'm terrible at that. But
I know a bit, but not enough in that universe anyway.
That's the other like real curious thing would be where Peter's going. Because he is back on Earth. Is he going to just be big chillin'? Like, is his character retired? I feel like that's probably not the case because it wasn't as big a moment.
Especially because at the very end it said the legendary Star-Lord will return.
Yeah, duh. Yeah, one of they always have, Marvel always has the X character will return. So you're right. It does say Star-Lord will return. So really, I don't know either. But what I think, I don't know. It could be cool to see him be like with like an Ant-Man situation because Ant-Man's still alive, which I'm sort of gripey about from Quantumania, but that's for whatever. I wouldn't be surprised to see those two come together because their characters are pretty similar.
Yeah.
And they've got that goofy dad-ishness about them.
The dad person.
Yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised to see those two come together in some way. He might just be a part of a new Avengers initiative because a lot of our big names in Avengers are gonzo.
Maybe we'll see him in Secret Invasion.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Yeah, I don't know.
or maybe he's just big chilling for a while, which I could totally understand. I mean, guy needs to take some time.
Agreed. I think especially because all these characters have been doing this for so long. Like, it would surprise me if we don't see a couple of them for a while. Which, like, is all right.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, like we've been saying, we love them, but it just makes sense.
You had mentioned it. I do think even just as a special presentation on how Rocket and Groot meet.
That would kill.
I think that would make numbers.
It would, dude.
Disney would bring in so much money just explaining how those two got together.
It would be a great story. And I'm sure there's a great story already written in the comics.
Especially because Groot,
what a character.
Fan favorite character right there. Probably one of the most loved characters in all of MCU.
Especially in the MCU.
Yeah.
And it's really, we were talking about it when we were watching the first two films, the evolution of Groot.
Yeah.
Is on its own something that could be explored. It's so cool to see. And even at the end of Guardians 3, we see a totally different Groot. He's more hulkish. He's thick and big, and we're like, spicy man.
He's gigantic.
Juicy boy.
He could get it.
That's what I kept saying to Bryson in the theater. Is it just me, or could Groot get it?
Could Groot get it? Oh, it was so funny. But yeah, I'm excited to see where they go. Yeah. And I like what they've done. And so kind of on how I like what they've done so far, we're starting a little bit of a new thing on the podcast. We're going to have a question of the week with each episode.
Rock on.
So in this one, I want to know, what is your favorite Guardians of the Galaxy moment?
Ooh, tough. We just watched Guardians 2 today. And when I saw it, I immediately, before watching the movie, one of my favorite moments is in Guardians 2. I mean, it's harsh to say, I guess, but Yondu's death gets me every time. Every time. That's and Peter's speech over it, his eulogy. Oh my gosh, that hits so hard. It hits so hard.
He may have been your father, but it wasn't your daddy.
Wasn't your daddy. Yeah. And and once again, you've got that deep emotion, and then you're like, huh, you look like Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Is he cool? Hell yeah, he's cool. Like, it's just, I would say that's probably my favorite. And then, like, the Ravager group coming back and giving him, it's so good.
It's such a good moment. I love that one. Yeah, I think my favorite definitely has to be from the first movie when they are breaking out of the kiln. I really love just, like, that's like their first like team up.
Yeah,
like they all have to work together into that, and I think it packs so much action. Me and my brother love to quote the "Oh, yeah" the part that Rocket says when he gets a gun finally.
Yeah.
I think that cracks me up every time, especially because if I'm watching it with my brother, we'll look at each other and be like, "Oh, yeah," and just like stare at each other. It's so funny.
That's great.
But it's like that. You get like the Groot being a little bit of a dunce, kind of just doing his own thing.
Yeah.
But then you have Rocket being super smart and being able to take care of everything. You have Gamora, who's like really independent and powerful. You have Star-Lord kind of being funny and going to get a leg. And then you have Drax just being insane, right? Just like, yes,
just loving the absolute destruction.
And I think it shows who the Guardians are.
It really does. You're right.
Because like we see them all before that scene, but I think that's where we really see the Guardians.
Yeah.
And so I think that is definitely my favorite Guardians of the Galaxy moment.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but you're so right. I've never seen it from that perspective, but I love that because it really is where those trust things start to attach, like where the team starts to form, because they really do put a lot of trust in Rocket right in that moment. And I mean, they joke about it the whole time, like, yeah, it's a plan, I don't know. And then like when they're flying out, he's like, that was a pretty good plan. Like, yeah, it was. Like,
he's like, yeah.
It was pretty great. And so you're so right.
I just have one plan, and it requires a freaking Cornex battery, so figure it out.
Yeah. And you're right. It really does showcase who they are.
Yeah.
And I would say, I mean, obviously those characters have some changes and stuff, but those like core things about them, I would say don't change all that much all throughout the trilogy. And so, yeah, dude, that's a really good moment. I like that a lot.
I love it. And so
he knows his stuff. We should listen to this guy.
But yeah, so that's my favorite Guardians moment, and I liked yours as well. So if you also have a favorite Guardians of the Galaxy moment, please let us know. I want to know what your favorite Guardians of the Galaxy moment is, because it's definitely the fan favorite. So everyone has to have some moment from those movies that they've really liked.
That's impacted them and they've kept. Yeah,
exactly.
It's true.
But yeah, so thank you very much, Cormick, for joining me on another episode.
Always.
He's definitely going to be joining me for most of the episodes this summer, as long as we're both here.
Yeah, hopefully more.
But yeah, so it's exciting. If you did like this episode, please give us a follow so you can hear more of me and Cormick talking about all things entertainment. And be sure to check us out on social media, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Easily Entertained. If you enjoyed, be sure to tune back in Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, where we're available on all podcast platforms. And if you want all the latest updates on all things entertainment, check us out on social media for Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And until next time, this is Easily Entertained.